It raises a lot of issues about why there's so much buy-in to a program that, at least on the surface, at least based on this reporting, seems to actually be hurting a lot of people financially.
Absolutely. And I mean, one of the things that we heard from a lot of people who are in favor of this program, like they call it a very common sense climate solution, right? Because I mean, it pays not just for solar panels, it pays for energy efficient water heaters, it pays for insulating windows and things like that. And in theory, that's wonderful. It advances the upfront cost to homeowners to make it more affordable, not just for rich people, but for everybody to outfit their homes for energy efficiency. But because it's not subject to these protections that were put in place after the financial crisis, you see all of these very familiar forms of abuse of this program,
Yeah.
with brokers going
Well,
door to door, targeting the elderly, low income people, people who don't speak English,
yeah.
and just some really shady
Well, part of
practices
this
going on.
abuse that I found interesting about it was the idea here that ultimately, at the end of the day, it's the government more or less that ends up holding the bag here by structuring the program in a way where all this money sort of gets funneled onto a person's tax bill, and presumably at some point that person doesn't make good on their tax bill. Now all of a sudden you have a tax delinquency that at some point the municipality's on the hook for. Why was that allowed? Why was that a feature of this program? And why wasn't there more risk offloaded to the private sector in this?
Well, so actually, a lot of these are packaged up and resold as green bonds. They're also, these PACE assessments. A lien gets issued on the home, and it's what's called a first priority lien, so it has to be paid back before a conventional mortgage. So actually, FHFA ruled in the early days of this program that Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac would no longer issue mortgages on homes with PACE because of the risk to mortgage lenders. So, by placing more of the risk on the homeowner, it made it more attractive to businesses to get into this thing. But, it winds up wrapping homeowners into some really just complicated bureaucratic financial regulations that the average person is just not going to understand and not be able to get out from without lots and lots of money.
Jillian, is it becoming aware by people who are taking these on, and indeed by the government itself, that PACE isn't such a good idea? I mean, we're talking a lot about infrastructure spending, a focus on greener efforts. Is this something that the government would want to use more or less of at the current environment?
I mean, that's the thing, to all the people who say this is a common sense climate solution, like, they're not wrong in the sense that if it had been executed in a way that protected the consumers, yes, it absolutely would have been. We really need to re-outfit, renovate a lot of buildings, commercial buildings, residential buildings in the U.S. to make them compatible with a net zero future, not just for that goal, but to, slow and eventually halt climate change. That's one of the goals that President Biden said in his campaign, was to renovate, I think it was 6 million buildings in total. As far as this program in particular, he was a champion of this back when it got started in the early days of the Obama administration. He supported it through DOE grants. Now, and actually the first climate plan he released as a candidate included PACE in this whole promise to renovate homes. When he released his final or his later climate plan last July, PACE was not specifically mentioned. We haven't really heard him mention it since. The signaling we got from the White House was that, sure, this is an option, but I don't think it's something they're really focused on at the moment. And you know what? If we can get them to reevaluate or put in some more consumer protections, so much the better.
Yeah, when do we see that? Because I'm on the energy.gov website, and they're still calling it an innovative mechanism for financing energy efficiency and improvements on private property. And there is basically no list within the disadvantages of some of the problems that you describe in the story. When do they change their website at a bare minimum?
That's a really good question. We were not told that was in the cards. And you know what? It is very early days for the Biden administration, and there's a lot to focus on, including the Earth Day summit coming up in a few weeks, and the U.S.'s renewed commitment under the Paris Climate Agreement. So, they're very busy, especially on climate. That said, we were told that the CFPB is looking at strengthening protection, specifically about instituting ability to repay requirements. This is something that California did a couple years ago. And you know what? The volume of new PACE assessments plummeted after they did that, which, kind of goes to show where some of the incentives are.